of corruption, a poor economy, and staggering joblessness, increasing crime and dangerous lawlessness, crumbling infrastructure and unacceptable load shedding, as well as the illegal influx of people from all over seeking refuge and resources from the state. As a result, our people take to the streets, and most of the time, government does not even have the courtesy to listen to them. In the rare instances where they do, they are lied to with a barrage of promises that never become a reality. These are just some of the prime issues of the moment, and there are many more burning issues like international relations, traditional leaders, and rural revitalization, education, healthcare, women, youth, and many more. For the UDM's views on these and still other topics, please review our full 2024 election manifesto at www.udm.org.za. Allow me, Program Director, to address you now on the state of corruption in South Africa. Let us talk for a moment about corruption. Have you ever heard an ANC leader standing at a podium lamenting about corruption? Of course, you have. So have I. Whilst all the time they and their colleagues are drowning in the graft. Loyalty is rewarded by the ANC with protection against investigation and prosecution as the culprits who have looted state resources hide behind struggle credentials. There is no political will to take the guilty to a court of law, and it is for this reason that Zondo Commission's report is gathering dust in Parliament. The reason is simple and unsurprising. The ANC is fingered in the report of Zondo. How can those that report identified as involved in corruption be trusted to find solutions to their own immoral and illegal activities? One may ask, we all know names such as Bosasa, Chancellor House, and so on, but don't let anyone pull the wool over your eyes. The ANC has for decades had its own hands in the proverbial cookie jar in order to sustain itself in government so as to continue to avail itself of government funds. No one can really wonder anymore who the real state capturers are. It is all those who run the ANC today. Even President Ramaphosa declined to release the performance reports of his cabinet, citing that he is scared these reports will embarrass government and his party. Yes, they will. And if you had no other reason to refuse to vote for the ANC again, this will convince you. The president even stated that he was willing to fall on the sword rather than reveal the names of those who abused public funds. Does that make him a hero or just another sleazy enabler for all the thieves in his party? The government invested the workers' UIF contributions with the PIC. These funds belonged to ex-mine workers, civil servants, retired military personnel, and others. Now it is gone and disappeared in the scandal involving these funds. In the same vein, ex-government employees are sent from pillar to post when they query their pension calculations. President Ramaphosa had, in the beginning of 2023, given instruction that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana should set up a team to investigate the pension for civil servants from the SATB states during 2023. The UDM's during 2023, the UDM's representatives and did everything within our power to facilitate the progress of the President's order. But we ran into a brick wall with Minister Godongwana, who has defied his own President's instructions. Now let me talk about the NSFAS and the SITAs. NSFAS and SITAs are other examples of government projects managed by the ANC that have been hijacked by their greedy and corrupt leaders. It makes my blood boil to think of how much has been stolen from ordinary South Africans by a political party that is in the business of stealing rather than governing. The list of smaller or similar thefts is nearly endless. Why? Because many of you blindly vote out of habit, out of guilt, to return the ANC to positions of power where they continue to feel that gives them a license to steal. Sadly, the billions of rands that were supposed to address the backlogs and imbalances of the past, build infrastructure, and create jobs have been siphoned off through corruption. These injustices took place and the culprits are walking in the streets free. The cancer of corruption has even engulfed our law enforcement agencies, where, for instance, our people are scared to stop at roadblocks for fear that the police officers will be up to no good. This has to end. Our law enforcement agencies need to be cleaned up as a matter of urgency. It is affecting perceptions of the local safety and security, and it is also tainting South Africa as an investment destination. Some of these things we witness show a total lack of patriotism on the part of these corrupt sharks. It would be advisable, for example, to teach our children at school exactly how the state works and how taxes should be used, so they know and they grow what corruption does. In the final analysis, corruption destroys freedom. Corruption destroys our freedom. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand the living conditions of some of our people. Go to the townships and our rural areas and towns to see where people must jump over puddles of sewage, yet the spending of trillions of rands has been announced over the years. It is worse in the former homelands. The worst performing province is the Eastern Cape, the province, the birthplace of Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, Chris Hani, Mbeki, and so on and so on. The roads are falling apart, aside from the N2 which Sanral is working on. The taps have run dry that were set up in the time of Ministers Ronnie Castles and Kada Asmal. There have been overwhelming calls for me and the UDM to come and fix the Eastern Cape. And it isn't as in the past, where I can use unorthodox methods to rise to power. The people must vote in the great numbers for the Eastern Cape. The UDM will reopen the factories and industries closed down by the ANC, as well as resuscitate the agricultural projects and the maintenance units used to maintain the roads without delay. The people of the region will be economically empowered to combat this neo-colonialism of a special kind, where Pakistanis dominate as shop owners. We will restore the Eastern Cape to the glory of yesteryear, where the people of the province own the province. Simamelane ke apha sihlangene ngozowulauncha imanifesto. Xa silontsha le manifesto siyabona ukuthi ilizwe alimanga kakuhle, ingakumbi apho irhafu zenu zithathwa kuni ziyosetyenziswa kakubi ngurhulumente ka-African National Congress. Sithi ke loo nto kufuneka itshintshile. Abantu base-Eastern Cape ikhaya lezi-stalwarts ze-liberation, yeyona province uba uyafunda amaphepha erhuqe emva, because imali enikwayo phaya iyatyiwa ngendlela engeyiyo, akukho zindlela, akukho manzi, akukho mayeza, kanti kufuneka kude kuthweni. Okanye mhlambi nifuna usebenzisa abantu bala province as voting cows. That must end, because bathi ngoku ye general awubuye uzophatha iphondo. Ndithi mna hey awuqenqele kokomxoxozi yophathi yongena ebhisho. Nxa nivote kuqala. Ayiseyo la Christmas kaholomisa namajoni yongena ngesibhamu. Kungenwa ngedemocracy ngoku. Uba bathi manibuyele pha mabawuvota basibonakalisa. I'm sure ukhwangu uyawundikhulula ndiyowuncedisa pha aqhube neparlamente nationally. Kodwa baba yenzi lonto hayi mabayeke ingxolo. So lilonke ke nto zakuthi ndifuna ke ngoku ukungena kwi-issue ye-governance, kulawulwa njani. Now let me tackle the issue now of governance, a UDM governance. Here we say there will be a zero tolerance for corruption, zero tolerance and abuse of power, effective procedures and special courts to be established to investigate and prosecute those in the public and private sector involved in corruption. Independent anti-corruption task teams to be established in each province to determine the level of corruption and to immediately introduce recovery steps. An end to usurping of the powers of the accounting officers by political leaders that issue political directives that are always laced with corruption. The development of system to reward and protect civil servants who are whistleblowers in exposing corruption. An end to schemes such as Chancellor House of the ANC and VBS looting of state resources and undeclared levies where business people are expected to bribe decision makers in order to get government business. In other words, a UDM government will not allow an investment company to belong to a political party and do business with the state. In the recent past, we have seen private companies colluding in price fixing and banks meddling with the currency. This must stop. The fight against corruption will necessitate investment in training of the civil servants and police in IT-related matters, as well as in closer cooperation amongst the relevant institutions. Establish task teams to clear house where government pensions and UIF claims have been compromised. Depoliticize civil service and law enforcement agencies so that appointments are only made on merit. Traditional leaders and civil society must play a meaningful role in monitoring government projects to curb wasteful expenditure. Ndithi i-UDM uba ingangena elawulweni okanye ibe kurhulumente iyawuthi mayiphele into yoba uthi ungukhansila, uyi-politician kwi-province, unguminister ku-national, ibe nguwe othatha ii-powers ze-DG, ze-accounting officers ne-MS, ube nguwe othi uzawunikeza i-directive bale business mayiye kubani. I-role ye-politicians must be to do i-oversight. Hayi uba ibe zizo ezikhethayo uba i-business mayinikwe bani. Yiyo le nto kwi-corruption kweli lizwe. Apha sihlala emnyameni ngenxa ka-Chancellor House no-Hitachi ekwakuthiwe mabakhe i-electricity generation eMedupi naseKhusile. The next thing uHitachi uzasephethe inkampani ka-ANC engu-Chancellor House bemka ne-38 billion yonke. Ngoku bazakuthi bathi masinyusele amaxabiso ombane ibe ngaba batye imali yolungisa ntoni u-Eskom. Now, kwicala lamakhosi kwi-rural areas sithi inkosi mazizame ukuthi zihloniphe political parties nabalungu wazo, zizame uvubulemela abantu bapolitike ngokukhululekileyo, kodwa inkosi nazo mazitreatwe ngokufanayo. Uboyakwazi unikeza i-4x4s eLimpopo eKZN uzinike inkosi, naphako Eastern Cape nakwezinye provinces ezinenkosi mazinikwe. Sanukwenza umkhethe kweli lizwe. Okwesithathu, izibonda ibhodi eziyazi zona zisebenza kakhulu emakhaya zincedisa abantu ekuhlaleni. Zezi zenza umsebenzi nokogqitha oceba, because oceba siyabavotela bahambe ohlala ezidolophini. Ibhodi ezithiwa xa kuthiwa kwenzakele umuntu kuhlatywe umuntu kubiwe inkomo kuyiwe ebhodini. Elo xesha ezabhodi azinikwa ne-stipend ezise-airtime. Sithi urhulumente makaziqwalasele ezo zinto. Ndiphinde ndatsho apha kule nto ndigqiba yirida uba urhulumente makabhatale abantu be-ex-mine workers nabasebenzi in general abadendwe emisebenzini kuba imali yabo ye-UIF itsalwa kwiisalari zabo. Why ngoku iyawugcinwa phaa yogcinwa kwa-PIC? Kwa-PIC bafike banikise ngayo ngapha. Aba bantu bayasweleka phaa ngasebuhlanti babanikwe imali zabo. At the same time, abantu abesebenzela urhulumente kwe-Transkei, kwi-South Africa, kwi-Venda, kwiBophuthatswana ne-Ciskei, sithi aba basebenzi bakarhulumente, upresident ndandiyiripotile le nto epalamente wathi hayi bazawulungiselela. Abakanyakazi kwanamhlanje uminister uGodongwane uyasinyashela wanyashela nalo instruction kapresident. Urhulumente ozawungena ke ngokusithi kufuneka prioritize at make sure ba imali yabasebenzi ababepenshele ebalwe wrong mabayinikwe, ingenzi lento ba ithathu imali yabo yofaka kwi-PIC ulungiswe kwethiwe izawuncedisa ama-BE njengosirela ababazi-billionaires banyuswe zezimali ze-pensions abasebenzi nabanye. Phansi ngomnyoluka phansi. Now let's look at, has come to the crux of the whole thing, the economy. Global economies are confronted with a range of geopolitical challenges and conflicts. They must deal with the effects of high energy and fuel prices, high inflation and disruptions in trade. All have had a negative impact on the South African economy. These have caused a cost of living crisis globally as well as in South Africa, with devastating effects on the poor. Yes, this does not discount or excuse 30 years of economic policy uncertainty. It does not explain the gross mismanagement of the South African economy perpetrated by ANC governments. Under a succession of incompetent ANC governments, South Africa's economic growth is less than 1% per annum, and the unemployment rate has reached crisis levels at northwards of 30%. In the last 30 years, ANC governments have failed to invest in the majority of citizens to generate more industrialists and wealth creators. The erstwhile businesses or business giants, have left the country with their cash. They delisted, and very little was done to fill that gap. The ANC's removal of incentives and the closure of the so-called border industries was a fatal mistake and negatively affected employment. Even now, when our youth are trained via the SETA system, they are not absorbed in the labor market. A UDM government, among others, follows a manageable public debt and budget deficit that has fiscal discipline as a basic tenet to ensure that government borrowing stays within reason, allowing for some flexibility to invest in infrastructure development to address the imbalances and inequality whilst creating jobs. We will also establish sector banks for the youth and marginalized communities to access capital to venture into industries such as textile, agribusiness, steel, farming, and food production, so that they might become wealth creators in their own right and create jobs. We need to have a distinct national fund to assist entrepreneurs, artisans, and artists to develop the latent talent in South Africa. Skills of this nature have assisted Afrikaner people in the past when they ascended to power, and the state took a leading role in their development. We have been promised industrialization for years by the Department of Industry with no industrialists to show after billions have been invested in this endeavor. It is not surprising that this has been another lie. We do not have an industrial policy to guide this activity. An industrial policy should be predicated on South Africa's comparative advantage, endowed as it is with resources. This issue ye-economy, if sifuna ukuyijonga kakuhle, amabhulu okanye abelungu abamhlophe ama-Afrikaner angena elulawulweni ethatha umbuso emangesini ephuwa efana nathi, kodwa bangena bathi state will play a leading role kwi-economy. Yiyo ke lento nathi ngoku siyi-UDM sithi ayikhona i-precedent sikhona. Why uzawulibalizisa ubusixelela ngoba i-exchange dollar itheni kwaze kwathini, kodwa ungathethi ngento yoba o-small business ngabona abantu bafanele into yoba kufakwe imali kubo ukwenzela uba naloo currency yenu ikwazi ikwazi uabsorba the external shocks. So sithi ke asiyithandabuzi into yoba i-United Democratic Movement siya-aware into yoba ungena kwe-ANC yangena ya-inherita i-economic policy apho i-state sasi-intervene khona, albeit under separate development. But intervene kwabo kwakukwazi uba kube khona amashishini njengoba sasibona koBhayi ekuruleni kwaNdebela former Transkei rich government yayine-factory. Ngoku into esixelwa ngayo silindele into yoba makuthathwe imali ye-pensioners ihambe iyowenza i-BE transactions iphelele up. What about the rest of the 60 million black South Africans? There is no way apho i-60 million population abantu abamnyama izawutyhuwisha okwembovane ifuna uyofuna umsebenzi kwinkampani ezilawulwa ngabelungu abayi-3 million. U-ANC kwi-last 30 years kangaqalisi uinvesta kubantu abamnyama. Therefore i-UDM funeka ichampione loo nto. Xa sibuyele emakhaya funeka sibaxelele kanjalo sibethe door to door uba asiphazami. We will make sure uba siya-intervene kwi-state, kwi-economy, and also i-private sector kufuneka idlale indima yayo, iyeke le nto yovala inkampani itshone ngaphandle. This advantage should be exploited for long-term competitiveness and sustainable growth, optimal exploration and utilization of resources to enhance the country's ability to produce a particular good or service at a lower cost than its trading partners should inform the industry policy. Creating infrastructure for industrial parks and special economic zones should form part of the pillars of the sector master plans, which have proved successful in Asia. The constant chopping and changing in our economic policies with the tripartite alliance partners vetoing powers, erodes investor confidence and drives out entrepreneurship. The history of South Africa should be at uppermost in our minds when we talk about economy, land, and property. Militarily speaking, in the past conflict between black and white in this country, there was no winner, and South Africans have always turned to the negotiating table to resolve our differences. The CODESA process, however, never finalized the matter of land and property, and we have never found consensus on the economic empowerment of the majority of our citizens. In addition, the ugly heads of tribalism and racism are rearing their heads again. The land tenure system, as well as the Ingonyama Trust in KwaZulu-Natal, and the cut-off date for any other land claims must be addressed. The UDM therefore proposes a national dialogue on these issues and others pertaining to land immediately after elections. These contentious issues will never be solved by one political party alone. We need to find a sustainable, or rather a suitable way to resolve this matter around a table instead of at the end of a rifle. Allow me now, Program Director, to address the issue of joblessness. Kutheni kungekho misebenzi thina UDM sithi makwenziwe ntoni? South Africa has one of the most unequal societies in the world, and it also has one of the highest unemployment rates. The primary objective of government must be to stem the tide of rising unemployment, with its attending adverse consequences for social and economic stability. What will UDM do? We will identify markets for small firms through promoting domestic and foreign connections to adequately address both the supply and demand side of the economy and developing capacity in the areas of improved businesses and entrepreneurial skills, as well as identifying the capital sources, as well as facilitating loans and investments in community businesses. We will also be having closer cooperation between government, business, and unions, where the role of each is clearly identified, with a view to specifically create job schemes, re-establish the maintenance units of old to maintain, for instance, government buildings, schools, roads, fencing of grazing and land crop fields, etc. We will establish waste management schemes to clean up South Africa, which has become the dirtiest country on the continent, and support SMMEs that wants to venture into this field. We will also be establishing soil erosion combating teams to tackle dongas, rivers, and other erosion after heavy rains. As cold weather is creeping up on us because of the climate change, planting forests in communities for windbreak and for firewood would be advisable. Allow me now to address the issue of poor infrastructure. The ANC inherited a functional infrastructure. What did it do? It neither maintained nor expanded what it was given, to the loss of a growing nation. From the UDM's perspective, infrastructure development is a critical factor in promoting economic growth. It also improves the quality of life because of its positive impact on the individuals, households, and rural communities. The new government will have to hit the ground running on fixing roads, bridges in rural South Africa because of lack of capacity in some provinces. The responsibility for provincial roads must be handed over to Central. To avoid the past scenario where presidents favor the areas where they come from, the UDM would publish a national infrastructure development map that articulates the role of government, the private sector, and communities with time frames, as well as follow up by the UDM's proposed maintenance units. Now let me address the other issue of load shedding. ANC Nowhere is the failure to maintain the infrastructure that was given to the ANC more evident than in our energy infrastructure. For almost 15 years now, South Africa has been experiencing debilitating power failures due to ANC government's failure or refusal or inability to invest in new power stations because of corruption. The corruption relationship between Chancellor House and Hitachi is well documented, where the money was supposed to build Medupi and Kusile. This has led to a point where load shedding is accepted as a daily part of our lives. Compared to every developing country in the world, this is a disgrace. What will UDM do? Given the challenge that South Africa has lost much of its expertise, we will propose a public-private partnership model for the privatization of Eskom, where the government holds a 51% stake in the entity for the people of South Africa. With the host of bilateral agreements South Africa has entered into, we will ask assistance from other countries with strong capabilities to give us an independent diagnosis of our power failures. The ANC has been lying to the people of South Africa about the cause of load shedding. We will ask the United Nations Conference of Parties to give South Africa a reprieve in terms of the deadlines for migrating from fossil fuels to renewable energy, and an opportunity to develop our energy policies based on the fact that we lag behind in our socio-economic development goals as caused by the separate development policies of the past governments. Allow me now to address the issue of crime. The ugly phenomenon of murder, violent crime, political assassinations, and drugs sold in broad daylight is cause for concern. South Africa today is the murder capital of the world, and gender-based violence is a scourge eating at the fabric of our society. What does this government say? What does this say about a government that cannot keep its citizens safe? As a result, local investment and international investors seek other destinations for their money, and tourists go elsewhere for their vacations. There is a sense of lack of discipline in the country and general lawlessness. People take over others' properties, steal livestock, break into homes, mug and rob on the street, brandishing weapons, and the list goes on and on. The law enforcement agents need to take back the streets. It is as if there is a sensation when criminals are arrested, But that's when where the stories will end. The police must make a good case for the NPA, and the NPA must make sure that they prosecute. The courts, and the courts must stop postponing cases and mete out the right justice. We hold no brief for people like Timothy Omotoso, Vincent Smith of the ANC, and Ace Magashule, whose cases have been dragging for years, where the state seems to be perpetually unprepared. Our porous borders mean that criminal elements enter this country, and we are facing the scourge of cash in transit heists, drug distribution, violent robberies, counterfeiting, rampant prostitution, and human trafficking. The criminal justice system is unable to handle these problems, which makes our people feel justified in their actions against foreign national, legal and illegal. What will UDM do? We will enhance coordination between the ministries of justice, police, correctional services, defense and national intelligence. Dedicate more resources to the law enforcement agencies to combat crime and implementation of the existing and new GBVF legislation. Invest more resources in crime intelligence so that the police act from an informed position. The morale of the law enforcement agent services need to be boosted by means of the revision of training, promotion, policies, and salary packs. We will ask the SADC countries to have an immediate leadership summit to discuss the issue of closer cooperation regarding cross-border crime such as hijackings, cash-in-transit heists, human trafficking, the use of military-grade guns in crime, the zamazamas, the environment, and so on and so on. Let me now talk about the issue of indalo, environment. Sithi apha zinto zakuthi ukuze elilizwe libe safe masitraine amapolisa makube khona i-coordination ezawuqhubeleka phakathi kwamapolisa amajoni intelligence sikwazi nokuthi i-crime intelligence lesi investe kuyo ukwenzela uba amapolisa kayinengxaki ayifumane information in time. Sithi ayikho into yoba ilizwe lethu kungene nabani engene ephethe isibhamu afika adubula abantu ahijack imoto athathe imali ezitruck zithatha imali zithutha imali. Ngoko ke sithi makuthethwe ne-SADC countries ukwenzela sibonisane emva kwe-elections uba singayilungisa kanjani nale meko siye phambili nelizwe lethu. Ingene kwizendalo, the environment. What sets the UDM apart from our opponents is our focus on the environment. South Africa is a signatory to several international conventions on biodiversity, sustainable development, climate change, etc. Then we have myriad legislations to consider. What is the connection between these documents? In addition, there are tensions between hunters and preservationists, those who favor culling and those who don't. Communities who live next to the parks are disenfranchised. The UDM would organize a national indaba on the environment where all stakeholders may gather under one roof to thrash out these issues. Our manifesto, however, focuses on climate change, waste management, diversity and conservation, as well as the sustainable harvesting debate, so you are free to read that part. Is there a hope in conclusion? Do we have hope as South Africans? The political pundits predict that there will be no outright winner on the 29th of May. and that we will likely have a coalition government which will bring an end to one-party dominance. This should bring South Africans a sense of hope that it would be possible to rebuild South Africa. The UDM would follow the Government of National Unity model, that it would be possible to rebuild South Africa together and in a spirit of cooperation. Now, the message to the UDM, ni vula mehlo, ni mamele kahle, nitsho uba nithi yes, nithi no, uba nithi no. The UDM members and supporters, as you are going out to campaign over the next few weeks, voters might ask you why they should vote for the UDM. In Maine, the UDM has been betting on the wicket of ethics of good governance. The UDM has been betting on the wicket of anti-corruption long before it became buzzword. We have been open and consistent these past 26 years, and we will do so in the future. The challenge facing South African voter is, however, simple. When you are standing in the voting booth, the issue of trust should be foremost in your mind. That will be your opportunity to answer such questions as, and I invite you, Bani Pendule. Question yokuqala ithi, can we trust the ANC to create jobs after they failed in the last 30 years? Can we trust the ANC to be custodians of the judiciary when they attack judges? Can we trust the ANC to fight crime when their leaders are dodging their day in court? Can we trust the ANC to fight corruption when they have been embroiled in one scandal after another? Can we trust the ANC to deliver quality education when they have consistently failed to do so for 30 years? Can we trust the ANC to improve health care when they have presided over empty clinics and dirty hospitals? The list goes on. One thing you can do is trust the UDM. Asiteketi kasithetha sihamba straight. Le train lenu bangaba usuke endleleni izakugila. We don't follow anything that moves. Silandela umgaqo seko. Dithi phumani ke ngoku niyongena ku door to door. Nixelele abantu base South Africa ba UDM ithini ibisenzani kule last 30 years. Ibi UDM yaqala apha yathi into ye floor crossing legislation mayiphume. That legislation is gone. It's no longer in our statute books. It was the UDM ewathi apha makube khona legislation yoba iphathi ezinikwe imali must declarishe. That legislation is in place. Kwakuyi United Democratic Movement eyathi kukwi corruption kwa IEC wathi samkhombe kunyango uchairperson wakhona nisayikhumbula. Ekwa UDM eyathi phaya uba siyakwazi ukuvotela ipresident nge-secret ballot. Naxa sifuna uyigodusa sayigodusa nge-secret ballot. Yayingeyo UDM eyazana loo nto. Ibingeyo UDM ibikhokele ngoku bekusithwa apha umbane awuziwe emapoliseni awuziwe ezibhedlele awuziwe ezikolweni saye court sawina. Ibingeyo UDM. Amandla phansi ngamasela phansi. Anisebahle man kanicula ingoma emandi man. Hey kanishube eshushu. Iphila ngoma ethi kanicule man. Hey.